Jesse did all of the wizardry, the technical wizardry on this thing. Don Rogers, John Herod, Sonny Rawlings. I started, first person I knew in Bath County was George Lee Hawkins, and I was hanging around with George back in the late 1970s. I met George Hawkins from Bath County, and I started going up there, and I'll just tell you one little anecdote. I think it was 1977. I went to a fiddle contest at the Bath County Fair. Now, in those days, you wouldn't have found something like this very many places, but in that fiddle contest in 1977, there was George Lee Hawkins, Bob Prater, Alfred Bailey, Eldon Calvert, a couple other people I didn't know, not playing bluegrass, not playing Bile Them Cabbage Down, but playing, and then after the contest was over, all these fiddlers were jamming out in the parking lot, and the crowd there, people who did not play the fiddle, were calling for tunes like, play Weddington's Reel, play Brickyard Joe. And I was amazed. Those were the local tunes that were not known anywhere else except among those fiddlers. But you see, the people in the community who didn't even play the fiddle knew those tunes, and those tunes belonged to them, and that's what they wanted to hear. So I just became fascinated with just the way that whole little scene had survived intact that late after it had disappeared everywhere else. And so over the years I got to know more fiddlers and more about it, and came across the name of Carlton Rawlings, who Alfred Bailey was good friends with, and Alfred Bailey believed that Carlton Rawlings was the greatest of them all. And we had also heard the name of another fiddler in those parts, Tom Reilly. Now, Tom Reilly was this shadowy figure that they all said, you know, a generation before George Hawkins and Carlton Rawlings, he was the one, he was the greatest of them all. What was interesting about that was his parents were recent immigrants from Ireland, and they had settled on the Licking River in the late 1800s, and they said people taking log rafts down the Licking River knew about the Reillys. Tom's daddy and his brother Steve, they were all fiddlers, and so people out of the mountains in the Licking River watershed were stopping off and playing music with the Reillys on their way down the Licking River. So then it turns out, I later found out that Carlton Rawlings, as well as George Hawkins, learned from Tom Reilly. And that's where the tunes in the minor keys and all those hornpipes they played up there came from. So I started tracking down. Alfred Bailey put me in touch with a number of the family members. Carlton died in what year?
69.
1969, before I got up there. But everybody there remembered him. Well, I guess it was 1986. Sonny, this is Carlton's nephew, got together, I guess all the surviving
brothers. Yeah, brothers.
Carlton's brothers. And we had a big interview and story session in Owensville, and I started to gather up information. And I want to introduce you to Sonny. He's my dad was to Shelby County what Sonny is to Bath County. He's the one who knows all the stories and all the history and all the gossip and who lived in what house and what farm. And it's just been this whole project is really because of him, because he fed me all the information. I knew nothing and I know nothing. But Sonny, you got to hear. You remember your uncles playing.
Well, you're giving me too much credit. And bad-mouthing your father at the same time. Now, when I was growing up, we didn't have much. I actually believed I was poor at one time. And I remember as a child, we would get together. Every time we got together, the instruments would come out. This was our entertainment. The radios we had at that time were not the best in the world. I still remember the battery radio, and I'm talking about the kind that took a battery bigger than most TVs now. But this was the entertainment we had. We didn't have a television, we didn't have any other way. So it was tall tales, music, and kids running around fish fries, you know. They would always get together with the fiddle. Uncle Carlton would lead it. Uncle Charles would have a guitar. Uncle Orrin would have a flat top. Some of the sisters, my aunt Mahala and Aunt Mabel and Aunt Madeline, would all be in there at one time or another. In fact, she's on a couple of, Aunt Madeline is on at least 2 of those recordings that we have, the home recordings.
Playing the piano.
She's playing a guitar.
Who was playing the piano on some of them?
That was Aunt Mahala.
Aunt Mahala.
Yeah.
That was one thing interesting about a lot of the recordings we did and heard, these home recordings. Pianos are on some of them. This is in a lot of cases you had fiddlers playing with a piano player, which is a little bit unusual in Kentucky.
But there was always music in all of the family. None of it came down to me as far as talent. I can appreciate it, but cannot get it to come out these fingers. I always felt like if I couldn't learn to do it in 15 minutes, I didn't have any talent. So I would get frustrated. I've seen Dad many times worry about the crop, worry about what was going to happen to the family, come in and go to that front room where the piano was, and he would play some of the old songs on it, everything from Black Mountain Rag on the piano to I'll Sail My Ship Alone, and he'd come out whistling, ready to go to work again. It was his Prozac. And I think music is a Prozac for all of us. This is something that brings back a lot of memories. John has added a lot to these tunes with the history of them. Gray Eagle, I always pictured was like about a bird out there. I had no idea it was about a horse race. Had a vision of some hawk-like bird that was gray in color out there flying around. But this has been an education for me, and we're working on another project that I'm hoping will be beneficial, because we're bringing in a lot of the names of people that he's mentioned already.
Yeah, we can't keep up with it, but we're going to do it.
The recordings that are on this CD have a lot of them were done, some of them were done in his practice session in a little utility room. It was almost like an echo chamber in there. There's a definite sound to it. I remember his practicing in that many times when I'd go and spend the night with him. He would do things over and over to the point that it had to be perfect. Regardless of whether it was making fishing lure or playing a tune on the piano, on the fiddle. He expected perfection out of a lot of us too. And that became apparent after a couple of conversations with my father. So,
yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling to me to think that. To me, the best recordings on this CD are where he's playing solo. There's a number of recordings on there where he's playing with a group, probably we figured at a family reunion somewhere. But in the big ensemble, he didn't really do everything he can do, and he didn't take the chances. He's just trying to stay with everybody, and it's great, solid fiddling. But it's just interesting to me how some of the best fiddling I've ever heard in my life was just this man recording himself in this little room in his house with nobody else there. As far as we know, he never played outside of Bath or Fleming County, did he?
Not.
I mean, he was not known as a fiddler.
Not professionally, no.
Yeah.
It's the conversations when I was growing up. I remember the brothers getting into an argument about either who was the best guitarist, Chet Atkins or Merle Travis. But when it came to fiddles, it was who was the best violinist, Joseph Heifetz or Fritz Kreisler. There's a lot of people that have no knowledge of who those people are. But my grandfather, I guess, would spend money on recordings of these individuals, and he loved good violin music and passed it on to Uncle Carlton.
But the story we were told is, although, let's see, he was the one who actually taught violin, but he either didn't teach Carlton or Carlton wouldn't learn from his daddy, and Carlton could not read music, is that right?
None of the brothers could read music.
Although the daddy taught violin and could read music. That was interesting. But you can hear that great tone in his playing. That just, his tone is just right dead on.
And his intonation is dead on.
Yeah, yeah. But he doesn't bow like a violin.
Right.
Don, you listen to a lot of that stuff now, and you're starting to internalize some of it.
Well, it's I moved to Bath County about 9 years ago, and one of the things that interested me in moving there when I did was the fiddle tradition that was so strong there, and seems to be pretty much dead now. But you had George Lee Hawkins, you had the Stone family, all of those Stone family members could play like the Rawlings family, great, and the same level of perfection too. Like whatever they're going to play is going to be as slick and perfect, and tone perfect, and all that stuff as possible. And then the unique tunes to that area that somehow got preserved. But I think one of the things that's very different now than it was then is that there's the whole economy, the whole lifestyle and community, including the music and all of that stuff, was connected to the ground, like right to the ground that people lived on. Raising tobacco takes a lot of hands-on, and all of the farm work that was done takes a lot of hands-on to do, and so people lived in the country because that's where what sustained their lives. Now people live in the country for very different reasons. There's cheap land, there's water running up and down the road, so you can pull a double wide in wherever you want to, and then get in your house and turn the air conditioner on and pull the shades down and watch, American Idol on TV, and get in your car and drive to town, and then your community happens somewhere else, really. Yeah. But at that time, the community happened because all of what sustained you was the ground that you walked on. And I think, like you said earlier in our fiddle workshop, that this may be a little bit of a stretch, and it may be a little far out, but I can't help but believe that the ground and the physical landscape really did shape the way those tunes sound and the accent that goes along with it.
Right. Yeah, it's not as lonesome as like the music up in the big mountains. It's almost like a whole different tradition. I mean, the Bath County and Fleming County music is bright and bouncy and social. It doesn't have this lonesomeness that people have in living in, narrow hollers where the sun doesn't come up till 10 in the morning. It's a different style of music. It's a little more northern, but it's also very Kentucky, because you hear a lot of the same stuff in it that you hear in Doc Roberts' music. But like what Don was saying about all these people were farmers, it's all the more amazing. I think, you know, we have this, some people have a prejudice that, well, these mountain people and these farmers that play this old-time fiddle music, it's all rough and raw and scratchy. Well, sometimes it is, and that music is great, but these fiddlers in Bath County were, I want to say, they were sophisticated. They were sort of vying with each other to sort of, there was some competition there to just play this music at the highest level. And when you listen to Sid Stone and Carlton Rawlings together, you see, okay, they're playing in the same style, and they're pushing it to the highest degree of perfection. It's not sloppy, it's not rough, it's just right on. And we're so, as Sonny was saying, we've got, Jesse and I have more of these home recordings of other fiddlers from Fleming and Bath County, certainly enough for another CD, and so we're going to try to do another one. The one we've done, this is what it looks like. Where are they going to be, Jesse?
Where are they going to be, Con?
Well, they're going to be available. I'm going to be busy. I got to judge a fiddle contest. I got to play. Fiddle contest, band contest, play. Anybody want to judge a band contest? But anyway,
We can put them back at the
Rich Kirby.
We can put them back at the merchandise table.
Okay, we can put them at the merchandise table. That'll be the best thing to do. But anyway, there's a book of notes in there that's kind of got all the history, that the tune stories about the tunes, and Carlton himself and the family that Sonny's helped me come up with, and great fiddle, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed. So anything, any questions? Or go ahead.
I'll say one more thing. These CDs are very important. This is the way we have to keep this thing alive and to communicate about this music with. So buying these CDs is very important. I was standing over there a few minutes ago playing one of those George Lee Hawkins tunes that's a very, like, nobody plays it. I didn't know anybody else knew it. And one of the people that's over at John Hatton's tent from Michigan walks over and says, "Can you play that B part again? I've been wanting to get that." And I'm like, I had no idea that anybody but Jesse knew this song, you know. And so I asked her how she heard it, and she had listened to the recordings of it. And I think that's a good example of how important it is to spread these recordings around. And there's no better way to have these recordings than to have the history well written and with them. There was a lot of discussion about whether you keep releasing CDs in an age when people seem to be buying less CDs, when you guys started doing this, but I'm glad that you didn't settle for anything less than the full physical package with the book in it.
Right, and that's something that we all feel a lot about. It's like, I mean, this music is going around the world. I was at Clifftop a couple years ago and sat down in a session with some people from Denmark, Norway, the UK, and by golly, they started playing some Buddy Thomas tunes, and I mean, they were playing them right too. I mean, they sounded like Megan Bryant up here playing that stuff. Couldn't have been any better. And I thought, well, I didn't think it was possible, but there they were. But to us, you can't really set, like Don said, you know, he thinks there's a connection with the landscape, and I can't describe it, but I know there is. You know, the different places that look different, they sound different. Now, why is that? I don't know, but there's something to it. And I just think you got to know. You need to know, if you're gonna take this music and learn it, you're gonna be a lot better at it if you understand where it comes from and who played it, and who they were, and their stories. You know, you got to have the stories. So anyway, we've got them, and we'd appreciate you. Jesse and I are financing these things ourselves as a public service.
And I want to thank John for all the work he's done on it. He has done all the literary work, and I think Jesse has done a lot of the mixing.
Jesse does the hard work.
It
No.
sounds great, I can assure you that.
No,
I've listened to it many times and the quality is excellent.
When I start writing, I get concerned about whether I'm dangling a participle or splitting an infinitive, and it just drives me crazy.
It's better to dangle them and leave them out. That's what I say. What was it? Winston Churchill said, you know, okay, try not doing. He said, this nonsense about not ending a sentence with a preposition is nonsense up with which I will not put. There you go.
Thank you.